It was a quiet Sunday morning at JFK Airport. Most passengers shuffled through security with sleepy eyes and headphones on. But near Gate 42A, a small boy stood alone, his back straight, his little hands gripping a navy blue boarding pass that looked too big for his fingers. His name was Malik Jordan, only 12 years old. Dressed in clean khakis, a button-down shirt, and shiny shoes, he looked like someone going to church. But this wasn't Sunday service. This was his first time flying first class. He didn't smile. Not even when the boarding agent greeted him. He just looked around nervously, scanning the gate like he was waiting for someone. Behind him, a woman in her mid-50s adjusted her designer scarf. Her name was Margaret Whitmore, sharp, impatient, and proud of her gold status with the airline. She glanced down at Malik and scoffed. "Excuse me, are you in the right line?" she asked. Malik looked up. His voice was soft. "Yes, ma'am." "I have seat 2A, Margaret blinked. She leaned in to check his boarding pass. "First class?" She repeated, loud enough for others to hear. "Sweetheart, are you sure you're not lost? That seat costs more than some people make in a month." Malik didn't say a word. He just nodded, silently. Margaret's smile thinned. She didn't like being ignored. Moments later, the gate opened and first-class passengers were invited to board. Margaret made sure. She walked directly behind Malik. When they stepped onto the plane, the flight attendant greeted them warmly. But as Malik stepped into the luxury cabin, Margaret's voice pierced the air. "Excuse me. I think this child may have stolen a ticket. I don't feel safe." The cabin fell silent. Passengers turned. The flight attendant blinked, confused. "Ma'am?" Margaret folded her arms. "I'm just saying. He doesn't look like he belongs here. He's alone. He hasn't even spoken to an adult. What if he's a threat? You never know these days." Malik froze. Not just from the cold words, but from the weight of being seen as dangerous, just for being himself. The flight attendant's smile faltered. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Malik held it up with trembling hands. The attendant checked it. "Seat 2A verified, but Margaret wasn't done. I'm calling the police," she announced, pulling out her phone like a badge of authority. "This doesn't feel right." And just like that, airport security was called. Within 5 minutes, 2 uniformed officers boarded the plane. Passengers whispered. A few pulled out their phones. Margaret stood tall, arms crossed, certain justice was on her side. "Is this the boy?" one officer asked. Margaret nodded like she'd just solved a crime, but then the officer crouched beside Malik. "Son, your name is Malik Jordan?" "Yes, sir. Do you have ID?" Malik quietly handed over a laminated card from his backpack. The officer looked at it, and his entire posture changed. He stood up, face suddenly tense. He turned to Margaret and said something no one expected. "Ma'am, I suggest you sit down and keep quiet, immediately." Margaret blinked. "Excuse me?" "You just falsely accused the adopted son of Dr. Isaac Jordan, the federal civil rights attorney, and you did it without a shred of evidence." There was a pause, heavy, uncomfortable, real. Margaret's face drained of color. The officer continued. "Dr. Jordan was already notified when your call came through. He's en route. And ma'am, you're on a no-fly list until this is resolved." A gasp came from the cabin. Margaret started stammering. I didn't mean. I was just trying to be cautious." But the damage was done. The flight attendant apologized to Malik and escorted him to his seat, offering a warm blanket and a soda. Margaret? She was quietly removed from the aircraft. As Malik sat down by the window, he didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just stared outside, whispering something under his breath. "I'm used to it. But I shouldn't have to be." Malik sat quietly in seat 2A, watching raindrops trace lines across the airplane window. His legs dangled off the seat, not quite long enough to touch the floor. The cabin buzzed softly behind him as passengers whispered. Some looked at him with pity, others with guilt. But none of them apologized. The flight had been delayed for over 30 minutes now, not because of weather, but because someone important was coming. Down at the terminal entrance, footsteps echoed. Dr. Isaac Jordan, tall, commanding, dressed in a sharp black suit, walked straight through security without breaking stride. TSA agent stepped aside. Like the Red Sea parting for Moses, his badge wasn't on display. It didn't need to be people who worked at this airport. They knew who he was, civil rights attorney, human rights warrior. A man who had flipped courtrooms upside down and rewritten policies that protected people like Malik. Today, though he wasn't here as a professional, he was here as a father. Upstairs, the flight attendant received a quiet radio message. She looked toward the gate, her eyes widened. "He's here," she whispered. Margaret, sitting in the holding area just beyond the jet bridge, didn't even look up. She was too busy typing something angrily into her phone, no doubt trying to spin her side of the story to whoever still listened, that is, until his voice filled the air. "Which one of you called the police on my son?" The entire gate fell into silence. Dr. Jordan stepped onto the aircraft, like a man entering a courtroom, calm, measured, but every word he spoke carried the weight of 1,000 broken moments. He didn't yell. He didn't curse, but the pain in his voice was loud enough. "Malik is 12. He's polite. He's quiet. He knows how to board a plane. What he doesn't know is why his skin color turns first class into a courtroom." A few passengers lowered their eyes. Others looked away. Dr. Jordan turned slowly toward Margaret, who now stood frozen beside the wall. "You could have asked his name. You could have minded your business. But you called the cops on a child alone." Margaret's mouth opened. Nothing came out for the first time in her life. Her words had failed her. The gate agent offered to reschedule the flight for Dr. Jordan and Malik to avoid further conflict, but he shook his head. "No, we're boarding. Because the people who get to stay are the ones who were right all along." He stepped into the cabin, nodded at the pilot, and took the seat next to his son. Malik looked up at him, eyes wide but calm. "Hi, Dad." Dr. Jordan smiled softly and placed a firm hand on Malik's shoulder. "I'm proud of you. You handled it better than I ever could have at your age." Behind them, the flight attendant cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight is now ready for takeoff." "And to our young passenger in seat 2A," she smiled directly at Malik, "we are honored to have you aboard." The cabin clapped, some of it awkward, some of it genuine. All of it late. As the plane rolled down the runway, Malik leaned, his head against the window, and whispered, "I just wanted to feel normal for once." His father reached over, pulling the shade gently closed. "You are more than normal, son. You're necessary." The seatbelt sign dinged softly as the plane cruised above the clouds. Malik sat still, hands folded, eyes blank. It wasn't the altitude that made it hard to breathe. It was the weight of being judged before even saying a word. Beside him, Dr. Jordan scrolled through his phone, pausing on an email titled, "Incident Report, JFK Flight 457. He didn't open it. He already knew what it said. What mattered now wasn't the report. It was what Malik had felt. Meanwhile, in the back of the airport, Margaret Whitmore sat alone in an airline holding room. Her phone buzzed again. Then again. Her travel account had been suspended. Her gold member benefits revoked. And as news started spreading across social media, woman calls cops on 12-year-old black first-class passenger. The world that once clapped for her was now pointing fingers. Margaret wasn't used to being questioned. She'd spent her life making assumptions, never being challenged, but now she was being seen, for the first time. And she hated the reflection. Back on the plane, Malik finally broke the silence. "Why didn't she just leave me alone?" Hissa's voice was barely above a whisper, but his father heard every syllable. Dr. Jordan leaned in. "Because people like her aren't used to seeing people like you in places they've reserved for themselves. But I didn't do anything." "You didn't have to." There was a pause, then Malik said something that stopped Dr. Jordan cold. "Do I always have to prove I belong?" Dr. Jordan didn't answer right away. He looked at his son, a kid who should have been excited about airplane food or a window seat, not facing trauma before puberty. Finally, he said, "You don't have to prove you belong, Malik. You have to remember you do, even when others forget." Malik blinked. For the first time, his eyes welled up. And Dr. Jordan leaned in. Closer. "Some people carry power in their name. Others carry it in silence and how they hold their ground. You didn't run. You didn't cry. You stood there with more grace than a woman 5 times your age. And that scared her. Down on the ground, Margaret opened the airline's email, her hands shaking. Dear Ms. Whitmore, due to your racially motivated misconduct during boarding, we are placing your name under review with the Department of Transportation's Civil Rights Division. Below it, a line that shattered whatever pride she had left. A formal apology is advised. Margaret stared at the screen. She thought about her job, her reputation, her country club. But mostly, she thought about that boy, the boy who never raised his voice. The boy she accused because she didn't know how else to handle her discomfort. On the plane, just as Malik was finally relaxing into the softness of his seat, the flight attendant approached. Mr. Jordan, she said gently, there's a woman named Margaret Whitmore on the line. She's asking if you and Malik would accept the written apology. She insists it's heartfelt. Dr. Jordan didn't even look up. My son doesn't need an apology to feel valid. She needs it so she can sleep tonight. Tell her we don't accept words anymore, only change. The flight attendant nodded and walked away. Malik looked at his father again. Do you think she meant it? Dr. Jordan exhaled slowly. I think she regrets getting caught more than what she did. The cabin lights dimmed. Outside, the clouds gave way to the glowing horizon, gold spilling across the wings. Malik leaned back, finally letting the weight lift. But just before he closed his eyes, a man from seat 3B, a white man in his 40s, stood up and walked to them. Excuse me, he said. I saw what happened earlier, and I just wanted to say, Dr. Jordan raised a hand. If you're about to say, not all of us, then maybe start with why any of you let it happen. The man lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. You both deserved better. And with that, he quietly returned to his seat. Malik looked at his dad and asked softly, was that real? Dr. Jordan finally smiled. It's a start. The plane had landed. First class was quiet, but not the kind of peaceful silence that comes with comfort. It was the silence that falls. After truth walks in, Malik didn't rush to unbuckle his seatbelt. He just stared at the seat in front of him, like it still held the weight of what happened. Passengers around them stood and grabbed bags, heads low, some throwing nervous glances Malik's way. Not one made eye contact, because shame wears silence like a mask. Dr. Jordan slowly stood up, adjusted his blazer, and placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. You ready? Malik nodded, but his eyes said something else. Not fear. Not sadness. Resolve. At the jet bridge, a crowd had already gathered. Not reporters. Not police. Airport staff. TSA officers. A few pilots, even cleaning crew. They'd heard the story. They knew who Malik was now. And more importantly, who he was always allowed to be. As Malik stepped out, a woman from the airline's legal department approached. She extended a formal-looking envelope. Mr. Jordan, she began, voice rehearsed. This is a signed apology letter from Ms. Whitmore, along with a donation she's requested to make in Malik's name. Dr. Jordan didn't touch the envelope. He looked the woman square in the eye. A letter doesn't erase what my son will remember for the rest of his life. And donations don't fix what silence allowed. The woman swallowed hard. Malik looked up. He wasn't angry, but something in his expression said more than any adult ever could. He'd learned something. Number 12-year-old should have to understand. Being right doesn't always protect you. Later that evening, in a quiet hotel suite overlooking the city, Malik sat on the couch flipping channels. Every station seemed to carry the same breaking story. 12-year-old black child falsely accused in first class. Airline responds. News anchors discussed racial profiling. Social media boiled over. One clip, just 9 seconds long, had already gone viral. I just wanted to feel normal for once. His words, unfiltered, unplanned, and now echoing across millions of screens. Dr. Jordan stood by the window, phone to his ear. Yes, I've seen it, he said. No, we're not suing, yet. A pause, because this isn't just about money. It's about memory. He hung up. Malik turned toward him. Was I wrong to fly first class? Dr. Jordan walked over and knelt in front of his son. You were brave enough to sit where they didn't expect you to be? You didn't just fly today, Malik, you changed the air. Somewhere else in the city, Margaret sat in a private lounge, watching the same clip, the same boy, the same words. Her name was trending, not for her charity work, not for her travel blogs, for the mask she'd finally been forced to remove. Her friends weren't calling. Her inbox was full, but not with invitations. She picked up a pen and looked at a blank journal, for the first time in years. She wrote honestly, I didn't fear him. I feared what he made me see about myself. And for the first time in her life, she didn't hit delete. The next day, Malik and Dr. Jordan visited a youth center in Brooklyn, not for press, not for sympathy. But because Dr. Jordan believed in showing strength where it matters most. He introduced Malik to a room full of kids, mostly black and brown, who had all faced judgment they didn't earn. Malik didn't give a speech. He just stood in front of them and said, I didn't ask for attention. I just wanted a seat. And now that I have it, I want you to know, so do you. The room clapped, not loud, but real. That night, as Malik lay in bed, the city lights flickering outside, he whispered, Do you think people like her ever really change? Dr. Jordan sat at the edge of the bed. People change when they get uncomfortable enough to see what they've always ignored. Do you think she's sorry? Dr. Jordan looked at his son. Maybe, but that's not the question. Anymore. What is? What will you do with what she tried to take from you? Malik blinked. I'll sit higher, and with that, he closed his eyes. The silence in the first-class cabin was louder than any scream after the truth came out. That 14-year-old Jamal was the youngest STEM ambassador from his state. Handpicked by the White House for a tech summit, the atmosphere changed instantly. The woman who had called the police. Mrs. Lorna Whitmore? She sat frozen in her seat, face pale, hands trembling, realizing what she had done. She hadn't just accused a child. She had tried to destroy his moment, all because he didn't look like he belonged. The flight crew who once hovered around her now avoided eye contact. Their smiles had vanished. One of them whispered, We had no idea. The police officers who had been called to escort Jamal off the plane were now apologizing repeatedly. But Jamal, he sat there, quiet, composed. Not because he wasn't hurt, but because he refused to break. His mother, Angela, walked back in after a phone call with someone high up in the airline's corporate office. Her steps were firm, her eyes were on fire, but her voice was calm. Too calm. I just got off the phone with Mr. Bernard Hollis, she said, her voice steady but deadly serious. There was a pause. Everyone knew the name, Bernard Hollis, the CEO of the entire airline. And what did he say? One officer asked nervously. Angela turned to face the gate agent, the flight attendant, and then Mrs. Whitmore. He said, This plane isn't going anywhere until justice is served. The tension could be sliced with a knife. Then, a voice on the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this flight is being temporarily delayed due to an internal investigation. Please remain seated. Whispers broke out. Cell phones were raised. Passengers began filming. Suddenly, a tall man in a sharp navy blue suit stepped onto the plane. He flashed a badge, not police, not security. It was Department of Justice. The airline had escalated things far beyond anyone's expectations. He walked straight to Mrs. Whitmore and quietly said, Ma'am, we'll need you to disembark with us immediately. But why? I didn't, he cut her off professionally. You filed a false emergency report on a minor. That's a federal offense. You will have a chance to speak, but not here, not now. She was stunned. Her mouth opened, then closed. The same passenger, who felt powerful enough to call the cops 5 minutes ago, now had to walk past the entire cabin with her head down. As she passed Jamal, their eyes met. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. But there was something in his eyes. Strength, not anger. Strength born from generations of battles fought quietly. Outside, the gate area was flooded with reporters. News of the incident had already gone viral. The headline? 14-year-old STEM prodigy harassed on flight. White passenger tries to remove him from first class. Jamal's story was everywhere. Within 2 hours, the airline had issued a public apology. Within one day, Mrs. Whitmore's job at the private law firm had suspended her pending investigation, and within a week, Jamal received calls from Harvard, MIT, and even NSA offering him full scholarships for the future, but none of that mattered in that moment. Because in that moment, as the plane finally took off, Jamal looked out the window, the world below fading into clouds, and whispered, "They tried to shrink me, but they only made me louder." His mother placed her hand on his and smiled. Moral of the story: prejudice is loud, but truth is louder. Jamal didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He stood tall, not because he had to, but because he was raised by a mother who taught him to never shrink to fit the comfort of others. And to anyone watching this, you don't need to scream to be powerful. You don't need to fight. Fire with fire. Sometimes your quiet dignity will be the loudest roar in the room.